Central Cee, arguably the biggest UK rapper on the planet right now, is back with an all-new album, Can't Rush Greatness.
This is his third album that he's released, and the last album that he released was at the start of 2022, so it's been nearly 3 years since we've had a project. So let's jump straight into this with the first track, which is No Introduction.
I quite like this track, good flow throughout, but I do think that it set the scene for what we can come to expect in terms of lyrics and the content of a lot of these songs. Right from the get-go, it was kind of flip-flopping. It was a little bit egotistical, whilst at the same time talking about how the effects of fame are negative, which I thought didn't really make sense to gel together in a track. But in terms of the beat and the flow, it was calm.
Yeah, I like the little singy voice in the intro, and then it kicks into Centra's voice pretty nicely. And the first rhyme scheme with the countries I thought was really fun and a really good way to start out the album. And as an intro track, I thought it works quite well. It gets us prepared for what's going to come up next. So let's move on to what is next, which is 5 Star, which to me, pretty mid-beat and a pretty mid-flow.
I thought that there was one really interesting line, which was, I felt like a prick when I went to the Brits and they gave the award to a guy called H. Which I don't think that was particularly a shot, but it was just a really strange bar to have in there.
Yeah.
And then again, this song just didn't make sense to me again in terms of lyrical content, because there's a bit where he says, can't say that I've changed despite the fame, but the entire song is literally about how his life has changed because of the money and fame.
It's a question as to whether he's saying he himself hasn't changed and his life and his surroundings have. But then I know what you're saying, though. It was very conflicting. I think it's definitely a head bopper. The beat was enough to carry it through. But we'll move off that onto Gator?
Gata, I don't know,
featuring Young Miko, though.
So a fair bit of Spanish in this one. I feel like this track was kind of made to blow up in America. Mm-hmm. Do you know, it sounds like the type of tune that would do well over there, and Central Cee's done a fantastic job of that. I think maybe I don't recognise quite how big he is. Like over there and even at UK festivals, he's got a huge fan base. And this was a decent tune. Obviously, I couldn't understand half of what was being said, but it was fun enough.
Yeah, so Young Miko is a Puerto Rican singer/rapper, and she's actually the vocals that open up the track, which again, I quite enjoyed. I liked the kind of, that against the beat. It worked really nicely. I wasn't sure what she was saying in her verse, but her flow and the way it was delivered was really, really nice. I thought it worked very nicely.
I did quite like the fact that up to this point it was very UK style in terms of instrumentals and the songs themselves, whereas this changed lanes a little bit. And then we'll go on to the next track, which is St. Patrick's.
Whoa, cheeky Wu-Tang Cream sample at the beginning. I'm all here for that. That was very cool to hear. I liked that. But there was quite a repetitive flow, but there was some decent bars throughout this. And one of the lines that made me laugh was, these American girls keep laughing every time I say bottle of water, which proper made me laugh. It took me away. And I can't lie, throughout this album, he has got them jokes. There is some good bars in there that make me go, you know what, fair play.
See, I've got a different line off this that made me laugh, and it was something around a Vauxhall Astra, which I just thought is so UK, it's quite funny. The only other thing I'd say, this to me just felt like a very stereotypical UK rap song for the majority of it, talking about being blacked out, wearing a Canada Goose, talking about going to the club and getting with someone's daughter. Like, that's fine, but it's not really the style of rap that I'm that engaged with.
Yeah, no, I understand that. It's a bit more on the drill side of things, I guess, and it's down the route that something I don't really listen to, but I can appreciate. But we'll move off onto GBP featuring 21 Savage. Oh, I've got a lot of thoughts about 21 Savage, but I'll try and withhold them for this review.
Yeah, live 21 Savage absolutely reeks. But I actually thought that these two on a track worked quite well together. Him as a feature makes sense. They're kind of similar artists from other sides of the world. One line that kind of confused me was when 21 said the price goes up if it's USD. And I thought, well, the pound's kind of worth more than the dollar.
It technically goes down.
But I mean, it kind of goes up in actual numbers. Anyway, that's a stupid thing to bring up in many ways. But yeah, as I say, good flows. The feature works well. I think that my only issue up to this point in the album is it feels very safe. It feels very like, oh, we'll do this track, we'll add this feature, it'll all work well.
Yeah, I feel like if we throw enough at it, it'll be fine. People won't dig into it too much. And it was quite funny that 21 Savage was bringing all the American bars, because wasn't he the rapper that was found out to be actually from Britain in the first place? So to hear him kind of taking the, I'm the American, you're the British person, it's like, no, you're both British. So
yeah, well, he has lived there since he was little. Yeah. But one other interesting thing I want to point out, and something that I do massively respect Central Cee for, if Apple Music is correct, on all the songs, he was credited as the only writer pretty much on every song other than the features. And on this song, there was like 5 different writers, which proves that 21 Savage, in fact, probably didn't write anything for this. It was all just random people, which kind of puts me off.
But also, could he not have come with something better then? Because I still don't understand the hype around 21 Savage. There's one song, which is that Cash In, Cash Out, which is Pharrell Williams with Tyler, the Creator on it. And his verse on that is fire. Everything outside of that, I cannot understand the hype. But let's not linger on 21 Savage and move on to Top Freestyle, which has a funky-ass beat with a funky-ass bass line.
Yeah, I love it. And I actually think that this had some really fun and quite intelligent bars. There was one around Kung Fu Panda that I really liked. It seemed like he was enjoying recording this one and writing this one a little bit more. I would also like to say, though, this is the second time within about 3 songs that he's mentioned upgrading meals, when he said something like, I've gone from a pot noodle to sirloin steaks. And I'm like, yeah, all right, I get it. Yeah, you're eating good now, but you don't need to mention it every 2 songs.
He hasn't started talking about tapping the Yammy yet.
Oh, God, yeah.
But we'll get there. There's all right bars on this, nothing to write home about. There was one section where he says, I'll get #1 album easy. It's not like the bar is high these days. So I'm very interested to see if that happens. I'm almost certain that it will, because he's just huge.
I would also like to point out in this track that he really shouted at the labels. He called out Sony and some other record labels, which I respect. And from what I've read about Central Cee, he is very much independent and practically has been his entire music career. I'm not sure if he still is, but it's quite impressive that he's this big, given he's never really had a massive record deal.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think you've got to give him credit for the position that he's in. Considering also throughout this album, you can kind of hear what his backstory is. You know, he was going around shooting and like selling narcotics, let's call them. And it was quite humbling to hear like his foundations and where he came from and the life that he came from to get to this point. So I've got respect for him in that front. But we'll move on to Up North, which kind of confused me, because then I was like, is Central Cee a northerner? But he's not.
Yeah, and the song didn't really have much to do with Up North up until the last 30 seconds, when there was kind of some guy talking about, if you come up north, we'll shoot you.
Did he mean north of London?
I don't know.
Because it's Ladbroke Grove that he's from, I think. And is that north of London? No idea.
Anyway, on the track itself, this was the point in the album where I was kind of getting really bored of just the references of how much money he has. This is where Tapping the Amex came in, and it wasn't for the first time. It had already come in at one point. And I'm just like, all right, yeah, we get it. I just wanted a little bit more content, because the flows have been there, the beats have been there, the production's been there, but it's just like the same things said in different ways at this point.
With this one, though, I do think you're not giving him enough credit for the topics that he covered, because he did start talking about his come up. This is the first time he was talking about his, how he came from dirt and basically ended up in gold. And there was a lot of talk about his growing up in a rough environment, and also a few references to his mental health and saying, you can't expect this much from me. I am a human at the end of the day. So I did have respect for him for laying that out on the track.
No, I like that. But at the same time, when you're talking about topics like that, and then it just switches to, so I tapped my Amex 3 times and then I took your girl home, I'm a bit like, well, just pick a lane for a song. If you're going to make it more deep and introspective and emotional, I'm here for that. That's actually what I'm looking forward to more. But then it just kind of flips to the standard bars that he can come up with, which disappoints me slightly.
Yeah, he does tend to hark on with the same things. But we'll move off onto CRG featuring Dave. Now, when I saw this on the track list, I was very excited to listen to this one, because I've not heard much from Dave in a very long time.
Yeah, Dave seems to have disappeared. You mentioned as well, a lot of the UK rap scene seems to be really quiet at the minute. We've not heard much from Dave, not heard much from Stormzy, not heard much from Skepta. Everyone's laying low, but these two on a track worked really well together. I really liked the instrumental on this one again, and it was still, Central's bars were still a little bit more about money, but it was also about how they both grew up in different areas and how they've risen to fame, and that's changed their life. I really liked Dave's section where he was talking about like being on a flight with his mum and she's eating all this stuff and taking all this stuff because she's not used to having that much free food. Like, that's quite a cool thing to explore.
Yeah, it's quite a humbling track, isn't it, really? And I think Dave and Sench do work really well as a duo. They had a mini project together, I think it was in 2023, and that was pretty cool. I think it was like 4 or 5 tracks. It wasn't anything major, but I think those two do tend to bounce off each other very well. And surprisingly, because I wouldn't ever really put them two in the same category of things that would mold, because they're very different in terms of their rap styles, but it does work very nicely.
I think they're both kind of the newer generation of UK rap. They kind of rose at a similar time. Central Cee a little bit later, but I don't know. I feel like they'll probably have a good relationship behind the scenes. And we'll move on to the next track, which is Limitless.
There's another track about his struggles. There's a reference to the film Limitless in there, which I thought, okay, yeah, I get that that's a track title, but that's a bit on the, I'm going to take 2 pills like Limitless. I'm like, okay.
There was one line in this that really made me laugh, and it was, I slept on the bando sofa and woke up with spots on my face from the germs. Like, come on. That's such a horrible line.
The thing is, though, there's a lot of bars in this about cleaning your face, and like it just makes me laugh because he talks about his girl when she stops over, like she's going to get all her cosmetics out and wash her face. I can't remember what track it is, but he's very obsessed with that.
I did quite like the fact that this song delved into a little bit more of what it's actually like having money and how people still are dying and people you still know aren't well, etc. And maybe people hanging around you a little bit more. I liked the topics of this one more, and with no feature, I think that this was one of the stronger straight up Central Cee songs.
Yeah, it made me realise that for some reason, all of British rappers have come up from nothing. It's always they've come up from really terrible surroundings and then made it big. And they've always grown up in like council estates or surrounded by, you know, drug dealers and the wrong kind of people. And they always end up getting to a point where they've actually made it and they're successful for themselves. And then when I think about like American rappers, sometimes we get them and they can be Nepo babies and that kind of stuff. I can't really think of any UK rappers that are in that realm of, you know, they were just thrust forwards into stardom.
I'm sure there will be, they just won't talk about it.
Maybe, yeah,
you
true.
would just never know.
Yeah, you'd have no idea.
We'll move on to the next track anyway, which is Now We're Strangers, which I thought was a real nice change of pace for the album. A much more introspective song about relationships and how he's handled relationships, etc. And there wasn't a feature on this as in listed, but there clearly was someone singing that wasn't Central Cee. I actually thought that this was a great song and exactly what I was looking for in terms of I'm fine with a bit of bang, 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 heavy beats, you know. This took it a step down. I liked it.
I didn't expect to hear such a soft track on this album, and then to have this to break up the album nicely, it worked. It positioned where it needed to be. It did what it needed to do. And I don't have a whole lot to say about it other than, yeah, nice work.
Truth in Lies up next, featuring Lil Durk.
Oh, this, right. Tell me if this isn't low-key an Ed Sheeran track. From the beat at the beginning with the little... And then even the flow is like an Ed Sheeran flow. Yeah, it all feels like they're biting on Ed Sheeran, which of all artists to come onto like a drill/grime/UK rap track... Ed Sheeran.
Strange. It's more of a singing number, this, isn't it?
Definitely.
I didn't particularly like it.
No,
I thought it was an album track. It wasn't horrible. I wouldn't be offended if someone put it on, but I would never put it on again.
Yeah, I can't really say I'm a massive fan of Lil Durk. I do like some of the stuff he's put out, but I think his feature was all right. Central Cee came with, you know, basic bars again. I don't feel like either of them put a lot of effort into this track, so let's not harken it too much. We'll move on to 10, featuring Skepta.
Surprisingly, this is the shortest track on the album, which given there's only 2 artists, given there is 2 artists on there, I thought that it kind of put a bit more time into it, some extra lines. They didn't, but it was good, really short, really to the point. Skepta's always great. I don't think the content of it was particularly fantastic, but I just quite like Skepta in his delivery, so that kind of saved it for me.
Yeah, I think Skepta was definitely the high point of this track, and when I saw the track listing, I was like, okay, so 10 is going to be a fire track because Skepta's on it, and I don't think Skepta really misses much. I can't say that there's much in his discography that I've gone, oh.
At the same time, though, I wouldn't say it was a fire track. It was just all right.
Well, yeah, but it was better than some of the other ones that we've heard so far, but let's not linger on that. We'll go to the big track, Band for Band, featuring Lil Baby. We can go Gat for Gat or we can go Riz for Riz.
Sheesh. This is just a manufactured rap pop hit for me. I actually really don't like... Who was the feature? I haven't got it wrote down. Lil Baby. I actually really don't like Lil Baby. I think that it was just auto-tuned to crazy. I actually couldn't even work out what he was saying for half of his sections of the song. I appreciate that it did well in the charts, but this one's not for me.
This went absolutely stratospheric. Like this left the realm of UK rap and just blew up. And obviously TikTok took it with a Gat for Gat, we can go Riz for Riz. And obviously that's a piss take of this track. It went further than it needed to go, but this was also released in May of last year. So I do wonder if it was just a case of, we had that fire single that we did last year, so we just throw that into the album as well. Because it also didn't feel like it fit the rest of the album. It felt very different to what else was on here.
I think maybe if this was my first time listening to it, I'd have been a little bit more open to it. But because I've heard it overplayed so much over here, it just made me... when I saw that on the track list, I was like, I've got to listen to that song again for the 100th time. So maybe I'm a little unfair on that. But next we'll go on to Gen Z Love.
Oh, so this was another single that was released in July, which made me think, is this another one that was made to go big on TikTok and then they just said throw it on the album to get some extra sales in? Very possibly.
I didn't really like this one. I actually quite liked the idea and the concept of the song, talking about how Gen Z people meet each other and find love, etc. There's lines on there about like meeting your mum on the For You page, stuff like that. But I think it could have been executed better. It was okay, it exists, but the idea had more legs to it than it actually came out with.
Yeah, it was a funky track, but it was clearly aimed at a TikTok demographic. And when somebody does that with the track, it immediately makes me switch off and go, you know what, I'll take it for what it is, but for me, I'm not going to be big on it. But so we'll move off onto Walk in Wardrobe, which in itself is low-key a flex.
Yeah, it is. But this started off really chill, and I kind of expected it to be a more deeper, introspective track because of the stripped back nature of the instrumental, but it wasn't. It was just practically the same bars as we've heard throughout the entire album. The only thing that saved this track was a random line from Kai Cenat and then it kicking off for the last 40 seconds, which made it really good for that last 40 seconds.
Yeah, the weirdest thing in this is that he's got bars referencing the Polar Express, and I can't imagine he's talking about the book, so I imagine he's talking about the film. Is it Heart Cold like the Polar Express? I was like, I never expected Central Cee to be referencing that film. But then there was also an Outkast Miss Jackson reference in there, which was very nice to hear. And then the random ass fucking Kai Cenat feature with the hold on, C's tapped in. That was cool. And then the verse that came after it was really cool. But it felt like maybe just take that end bit of the track and have a whole separate track where you just deliver fire bars for like 2 minutes straight. I think that would work much better than tucking it away at the end, because I feel like the first couple of minutes of this track doesn't do the final minute justice, and you know, people might miss out on that end bit because they don't listen all the way through. So
yeah, that it was definitely the highlight of the track. But we'll move on to Must Be, which for me is the worst track on the album. Some of the lines on this were truly atrocious. I've got two written down here. One is, if she don't want to fuck, then she must be gay, which is just crazy. Like
that's him calling back to his big track though, isn't it?
Yeah, I know, but it's still pretty, as a line, it's awful. And then repeated a few times throughout the choruses, and they don't want smoke, so it must be vape.
It must be vape. Oh. Yeah, I've got that down as well.
Like, look at those two lines are just atrocious. One of the main lines in the track is, they don't want smoke, so it must be vape. Yeah. Come on, man. Like, I appreciate, I said earlier, I'm happy that he wrote all the tracks, but maybe he shouldn't have done. If this is the second to last track, and this is the point we've got to.
Maybe he should have had some ghosts in at this point to say, listen, let's move away from the vape bars, because that's, you know, literally move away from the vape bars. Jesus Christ. Anyway, go on to the final track, which is Don't Know Anymore. It's a safer beat. It feels like the rest of the album, it feels like it's gone back to what it was at the start. Kind of cool to have that journey throughout. There wasn't that much of a journey, but it was nice to hear, you know, it swing back to what it was initially.
Yeah, I think the lyrical content of this was a little bit better than many of the tracks as well, talking about family life, growing up poor, like family members passing away and stuff. I thought that this was a fitting way to end the album. It all synced together. So Tim, give me some thoughts on the album as a whole.
You know, I was genuinely surprised by not how much I liked the album, but how much of the songs on the album that actually worked for me, because I was expecting to come into this and think like, you know, most of them will be throwaway, because I mean, all credit to Central Cee, a lot of his bars are very the same, his flows are usually the same, all of the songs start to merge into one, but it did feel like each of these tracks had its own, like, what would you call it, personality almost? Yeah. There was some in there that felt repetitive, but there were quite a few standout tracks.
For me, I'd say this album was quite bipolar. There was some really high moments where, like you, I was shocked that I was enjoying it so much, but then there was some moments where I was really like, this could so easily be improved that it's unnecessarily this bad. And that kind of spoiled it for me. I thought, as an album listening experience, there's a few tracks that I'd pick out, but as a whole, it had a lot of low points.
Yeah, it did. I think one of the main things that worked for this album really well was the beats and the production, which we spoke about a few times. I thought those were really good throughout. And also the feature list, because that's star-studded. And you know, like 90% of the features actually brought some fire to the track. There was a couple of misses in there, but mostly I thought the features worked really well. And he's done a good job to get all of those onto one album. And I can see this album doing very, very well in the charts.
I'm on the same page as you there. I think the features worked well. And one thing I will say as well, well, if he did in fact write all of these songs, then there were a lot of good references in there, little Easter eggs for some people, like movies mentioned, etc., and very UK topics that were talked about, which I like and I love to see. But at the same time, apart from that, there was so much repetition in topics, and even just talking about the same thing specifically with slightly different bars. The amount of times a credit card or Amex was mentioned, the amount of times having different meals was mentioned.
Generational wealth, that was another one that was thrown in there a lot.
Like, I appreciate that, you know, that's the life he lives now, but also maybe try switch it up a little bit and it'll lead to a better album listening experience. But Tim, what would you give this album out of 10?
So I'm gonna be what I would class as kind here, and I'm gonna give it a 5.5 out of 10. And the reason for that is because I think there was more than half the tracks that I enjoyed, but unfortunately there was a lot of them that just felt very repetitive. But like I was saying, there were a lot that shone through, and it was genuinely surprising for me because I was expecting to bring a sub 5 rating to it with it just being Central Cee and not being my style. So I was pleasantly surprised. But what would you give this out of 10?
So I'm lower, but only slightly lower than you. I'm at a 4.5. Similar answer, really. There were some high moments and some really good tracks on here, but I would say 60% of it was pretty missable. So that's that.
It is what it is. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. We cover all sorts of big albums. We've got some in the pipeline. We do the best albums of the biggest artists, the worst albums of the biggest artists. So stick around, have a click around, see what you find.